we are free. We're celebrating freedom. I really did want to talk a little bit about freedom, but before I really get into that, I want to go back to the basics of science of mind, because everything that we talk about here, we try to put it into some kind of context with our philosophy. And so, like Morgan read, the very first thing we need to understand is that each one of us is a child of the infinite goodness that we call God or Spirit. I mean, the truth is that you are actually created right out of the substance of Spirit. And since that is so, then you're already perfect. You have to be perfect. You have to be perfect, whole, and complete in your essential beingness. There is something in each one of us, something in us that can never truly be harmed, no matter what. It is that eternal beingness, which is what is the invisible part of us that's always flowing out into expression. And that's not all. You know, am I too quiet?
Oh, you're perfect.
Oh, good, thank you. That's like I was saying, we're all perfect. So we also need to recognize that since we are made of the very stuff of creative principle itself, then that also means that we are also intrinsically creative. Since we are made of love itself, it means we are intrinsically loving in our very deepest essence. And we have this ability to think, to understand, and to make conscious decisions based on our understanding. We each really do have freedom of choice. So in the early 1900s, because I like to go back a little bit, when we talk about the basics, I don't know, there's a lot of people who talk about affirmations and doing this today, but I think sometimes when we go back to the roots, we can kind of get the basic ideas. So in the early 1900s, Judge Thomas Troward, who was a lecturer on metaphysics and new thought, wrote about the nature of the all-originating spirit being life, love, light, power, peace, beauty, and joy, as we believe today. And he also declared that spirit's active power was that of initiative and selection, choosing. This is the activity, the creative process. And he went on to say and declare that each human being provides a fresh standpoint for this, what he called the self-contemplation of spirit. And that all of us, in our wide, amazing variety, affords an infinite variety of expression. We do have a purpose. There is a reason for us to exist as human beings with freedom of choice. And when we are able to recognize ourselves as being one with spirit, then we are engaging in that act of self-consciousness or self-awareness that, as Troward put it, sets us at liberty to become more fully ourselves, because we know that we are basing our development not upon the strength of our own unaided will, nor yet upon any sort of extraneous help by others, but upon the universal law of good itself manifesting through the universal law of personality is what he called it. Now, it might have been fine to call it the law of personality back in 1900, but we live in the day of influencers, so I'm not going to call it personality, right? Let's call it the word individuality, right? We're individuals, unique individual people, each one of us becoming more and more self-aware. Each one of us a human being who is able to use their innate creative powers affirmatively. How Trauer taught that spirit, through evolution, had created what we think of as the four kingdoms: mineral, plant, animal, human. But he said now, and it's still now, even though it was then, it's still now, that now it is our task as humans to make our own conscious transition from the fourth kingdom, which is simply being human, into what he called a fifth kingdom of being a self-conscious human, where we are aware of our unity with spirit, and where we are able to consciously use the creative power of the individual. So, he called it use the creative power. In Science of Mind, we often try to say, oh, we're really just co-creating because we're not actually God itself, so we didn't create the universe. Only spirit creates. We're just doing something amazing, actually. We don't create something out of nothing. What we do is we use our thoughts in the same way that a gardener plants seeds. We plant our thoughts into universal mind, and universal mind responds, just like the soil responds, bringing forth whatever is planted. It's actually the very same process that Jesus described when he said, in many different ways, it is done unto you as you believe. It's the same process that the founder of Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, was talking about when he said, there's a power for good in the universe greater than you are, and you can use it. But I have to say, when a person first hears about this idea, it can actually seem unbelievable. Oh, that's crazy, fantastic in a science fiction kind of fantastic way. But really, like Trauer said, we are able to think freely. We are at liberty to think whatever we want, whenever we want, or not. When we're not thinking freely, we're generally feeling constrained or limited in some ways. So the thing that I kind of wanted to talk about in relation to the history of our nation is how can we set ourselves free? So when you think about the idea of independence that we celebrated on the 4th, it's a big idea. Thinking about, a whole nation declaring that, from henceforth we're going to be independent is a very big example of the creative power of consciousness at work compared to when I say, oh, if you plant a tomato, you're going to get a tomato. That's a little example, right? And we often say that spirit doesn't know the difference between big and little. Metaphysically speaking, it's a law. We're talking about a law. We're talking about something dependable. So if you think about it, the 4th of July, Independence Day, is actually celebrating the signing of a piece of paper. I mean, think about it. The 4th of July isn't about the Constitution or anything like that. It's about signing a piece of paper that expressed a powerful idea that the founders of the nation had come to understand and accept. And if you read the Declaration of Independence, it doesn't lay out what the government's going to be like. It doesn't say it's going to be like this and it's going to be like that and you're going to have these riots or whatever. No. It's this idea. It's the new thought. And the most famous words that I'm sure you're familiar with in the Declaration of Independence are, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So just think about this. 248 years ago, plus, 3 days, the signers of the Declaration of Independence were actually saying exactly what we teach in New Thought today. That we all have a pre-existent and an obvious right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have the right to be joyous. We have the right to be free. And we have the right to live life abundantly. So in their document, they were planting thought seeds of life, liberty, and the right to pursue happiness. And those thought seeds have grown, survived, and really been nurtured by generations so that we are still able to harvest good from that declaration that was signed so long ago. We're still harvesting the good from that today. So we need to recognize that our teaching of New Thought isn't new to the world. It also, in a way, you could say, is based on a pre-existent spiritual law. When we look at the teachers of New Thought that we tend to praise and look to, like Thomas Troward or Ernest Holmes or Raymond Charles Barker or Emma Curtis Hopkins, or think of any New Thought teacher you may have had, they didn't invent these ideas. And for that matter, neither did the founders of our nation. They discovered them. They discovered them, then they incorporated them, and then they used them just like we are doing constantly every single day. So I saw a quote on Facebook, and this is by Dennis Merritt Jones. He's another great New Thought teacher. But he put a quote by Benjamin Franklin that said, "Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as liberty without freedom of speech." Franklin discovered this and shared it. And I want you to notice that he tied together freedom of thought with wisdom and freedom of speech with liberty. It was this idea of freedom as a real possibility that welled up through Franklin and the others. It was an idea behind the founding of the United States, and it was then put into words through the Declaration of Independence. The act of which, putting it into words, written, spoken, was the act of planting the idea into universal mind. And it has been our acceptance and our nurturing of these ideals that have enabled the idea to stay strong and alive for us, even as the years have gone by. So let's just take a minute to look at the power of words from a more metaphysical point of view. So I'm sure you heard the Old Testament passage from Genesis. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we, in Science of Mind, could define the Word as the ability of spirit to declare itself into manifestation. Luckily, I mean, we talk about planting thought seeds, but a lot of them are weeds. On a personal level, I will tell you, some of my thoughts are like, oops, I don't really. But when I make a declaration, when I say, aha, this is the thought I declare to be the truth, my truth, this is the thought I want to call into manifestation in my life, there I am using the power. This is what we do. We use the power in a conscious way. And if we're also, of course, using it unconsciously, getting a little crop of weeds going, but we can pull them out. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about this. I know sometimes it seems technical when we go back to Thomas Troward and talk about the creative process. But the important thing that I wanted to get to is that it was a declaration of independence. It wasn't a plea of independence. It wasn't a theory of independence. It was a declaration. So every year on the 4th of July, the whole nation is celebrating a declaration. And metaphysically speaking, this declaration shapes the manifestation of spirit. Just like when we speak aloud, a spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer. And so when we say affirmative, we mean positive, according to our belief, filled with belief. We are also making a declaration, and this declaration we think of as creating an invisible mold or potential shape that then spirit fills. Something happens. It's brought into manifestation through the action of what we call the law of spirit. So this is what I mean when I say that a declaration is a thought seed planted in the fertile soil of spirit. So let me give you an example, because sometimes you're like, yeah, but I have to do the work. So I used to be a pretty big vegetable gardener, but I'm really not anymore. But gosh, I like to have a few fresh tomatoes. So for a long time, we would just plant a few tomato plants, and we do have a gardener who comes and mows lawn. And I never said, oh, can you please get some tomatoes for me? But suddenly, he just started. Every year, he brings 4 tomato plants and plants them in the yard. It's like, I never said, oh, Daniel, could you bring me some tomato plants? They just come. Why? Is this not just one more manifestation of the unfolding of spirit in an unexpected way? I didn't expect that. I just knew I wanted tomatoes. I could have planted them, or they came by some other means, but they came. So the question that I was thinking about today is there anything else we can discover about the Declaration of Independence that can guide us into perhaps greater success in setting our own ideas into motion? Well, I think that we need to also pay attention to the fact that the document did contain a list of over 24 reasons why the colonists wanted to separate from Britain, why they wanted to dissolve the status quo and establish a free nation. It was not just a random decision. It's not that they just got tired of how things were. They were impelled by their experience and their understanding of what was, and then by their transcendent desire for what could be. So they declared their freedom from the rule of the king, and they declared their freedom to create a new nation in accordance with their beliefs. And that's what I'm saying. The details weren't worked out, but they had this idea. And the idea laid the whole groundwork. So metaphysically speaking, we could say that they examined and dissolved the unwanted condition by breaking off the relationship with it. And then they brought into being the wanted condition. You could say that metaphysically speaking, they weren't like gardeners pulling up the weeds, planting a new seed. Now, of course, the truth is it took years for this idea to come into manifestation as an actual new country. And it took even longer to trickle down into the experience of everyone who lived on this continent in the vastly expanding, from coast to coast, state of our country. And I'm not going to go into all the struggles and mishaps and, missteps that will happen on the way. Because we all know that in our own lives, we have a great idea, but we may have some struggles on our way to that evolution. But what's important is that there was progress. There is progress. There was an evolution and a growth into this idea that's still taking place. Struggles or not, it has endured, it has evolved, and it has strengthened. So that now we actually have a clear idea of what the word equality means. We have a clear idea, I'm sure, than our founders did, of what a government for the people or by the people looks like once it's worked out into practice. We've evolved from a country where even when it was first set up, only a few rich men could vote, into a general recognition that if all people are created equal, then all Americans share in the responsibility for the wise unfolding of our future. You could say, in a spiritual sense, there isn't really a big difference between us and the signers of the Declaration of Independence. We also have the capacity to be powerful thinkers, powerful deciders. But the thing is, how can we discover our truth? How can we discover what declarations we ought to be making? I think it's just a matter of becoming spiritually awake, allowing our fears of stepping out to dissolve, and begin envisioning the newer, the more perfect state of livingness that we would like to experience with faith. This is how we plant the thought seeds of our own personal and shared world of good. Emma Curtis Hopkins taught that there is good for us and we ought to have it. Ernest Holmes said that because we live in a democracy, we are particularly insistent upon our right to choose in our affairs, and that in the realm of spirit, he counseled this, in the realm of spirit, we should be equally appreciative of such a privilege. He said, you need to remind yourself that spirit surrounds you, that spirit is unlimited, that spirit is the source of all things, and that spirit is always becoming something in your experience, And that something is decided by you. You must remember that the law of spirit is actually entirely impartial and neutral. It doesn't care what the man has made. It produces whatever is planted in it, just like the soil in a garden. We already know about this, even if we don't always use it for our good. Even though, Holmes said, even though the illustration of the garden is very simple, and even though it has already been given repeatedly, remember this about it. You don't have to understand the processes happening in your garden before you can plant a seed. Don't wait. Don't wait until you have a full understanding of this marvelous process. Go ahead and use it. You know that a radish seed will produce radishes. You accept this as a law of nature upon which you can depend. And so he writes, let's see now if you cannot be just as sensible in the matter of your spiritual planting. I like that he said that. Just do it. Realize that you're always doing it. And then he goes on to talk about how to build up a mental equivalent, how to get a clear idea of something that you are willing to believe in, something that you are willing to have faith in. And basically, it's the very same process that the founders of our nation followed with their Declaration of Independence, dissolving a relationship with an unwanted condition, deciding upon and declaring a new relationship with the wanted condition. By setting ourselves free from limitations, we become free to experience abundant, beautiful good. So, this week, in preparation for our upcoming series that Reverend Maureen and I have agreed upon, our upcoming series on abundance, all the different aspects of abundance. This week, why not give some thought to what is holding you back or limiting you? What you might like to consider seeing dissolved from your experience. And also, perhaps, allow yourself to begin to imagine what new thought seeds you would like to plant and nurture in your garden of life. Think about different possibilities. When I was a vegetable gardener, I used to draw little charts. Oh, I'm going to have carrots here, tomatoes here, and no weeds, right? What would you like to plant? So, today is the day. This is the morning. This is our morning to begin to open the door to good. Do it. Do it now, and you will discover that good will come rushing in, bearing the gifts of abundant life, liberty, and happiness. This is the way it works. And so it is.
So it is.